Resume record. I don't know where the recording is going to go to, but I'll figure it out afterwards. But really, guys, I know I've talked to a few guys about the little tweaks I've made in the script, just simple little things, because I don't change much, but I change a little bit. So I'm going to kind of like share my screen and have the script pulled up while I go over this. So really what I wanted to focus on today was just like the difference that I've started using in tonality. And I'm just going to go over like exactly how I go through my flow. And then the parts that I don't really change, I'll kind of skip over just to save time. And then at the end, I'll kind of want to go over just kind of like what my thought process is while I'm going through a close, how I'm like, what things I'm multitasking and when. And then we can go over like just pushing people at the end if you guys want to go over that as well. And also real quick too, so I feel like with this job, like one of the biggest things for me, and maybe it's just because like I got lucky when I first started doing it, but I just have like, I think the mindset obviously in sales is always huge. And I know that's like beating a dead horse because you guys have heard that for years, but it really is. I feel like one of the biggest differences that's helped me like sell like, 30, 40K every single month has just been, I'm just expecting to. And I know that sounds so corny, but it's just like every single day when I log on, I'm like, all right, I get on at 8:30 and I would usually dial until 5 or 5:30 every single day. And I'm on Pacific time. So during those hours, I'm just like, I'm hoping to get one before lunch and I'm expecting to get another one after lunch. So I'm just expecting to get two every single day. And if I don't get two, it's like a bad day for me. And if I get 3 or 4, awesome. But if I'm expecting to get two every single day, I don't really see any reason why you can't. And maybe it's just because, I don't know, I'm getting like my closing ratio isn't anything crazy. I'm probably getting 5 to 6 presentations a day though, on average, or I'm getting at least like 5 or 6 long conversations and I'm getting like 2 closes out of that on average, at least the last few weeks. That's kind of how it's been for me. One quick thing too, while we have everybody on here, I got a second number, which I highly recommend now that I've had one. I got like an eSIM through Verizon. It's $15 a month. And you can change the number whenever. I'm sure every carrier has a similar thing. At least that's what they told me. I haven't changed the number yet because my original number got marked as spam. And obviously I was like, so 3 weeks ago before I made this change, I only had like 5 or 6 closes on the week and I wasn't getting many answers. I was getting straight to voicemail a lot. So that's happening to you. Highly recommend getting a second phone number. You can keep your same phone. I only have one phone and you can just switch back and forth between the numbers, which one you dial off of. So I dial people off of my new number. And then when I send them my credentials, I send them a copy of my state license for their state. I send them a copy of that VA contact card that they give us. I send that from my personal number. And then at the end of the call, I have them save my personal number. And I kind of tell them, so this number I'm calling you off of, this is kind of like the business line. I'm going to give you guys my personal phone number, the direct line, my friends and family call me on. So if you guys ever, the normal part of the end of the script, if you guys ever need anything in regards to this coverage, please save this number. I'll have them write it down if they're old, especially that I read my number out to them, 912-432-2867. That's my direct line. That's my personal number. Like I really drill that into them. So I'm calling them off of a different number. And then I send them like my text message. I send them my credentials. So yeah, quick tip there. If you're getting spam, if you're not getting a lot of answers, I highly recommend that. But really, guys, I know a lot of people have asked me, and I've gone over it with a couple of you guys, so I'm going to go through the script. I don't really change too much. I stick to the exact same flow. There's sometimes, though, I will change a few things. So that's kind of what I'm going to go over. But really, if I can take away like one thing from this training, mindset is huge in this job. You have to be positive. You think your leads are shit, they're going to be shit. The guys who are closing 50 to 80K a month doing this job, which there's like at least 10 of them in this agency. We're all using the same leads. If anybody wants to ever trade leads with me, you think I'm getting magic leads, I'm happy to trade leads with you. But like the leads are fine. I know some people have like been, and there have been situations where like Tyler, Juan, Christian, I know you guys have gotten like some shitty leads that are like from Mexico or whatever. Obviously that's different. But yeah, guys, the people that are closing a lot are using the same lead sources we are. So just be positive about them and just expect to close every single day. But to going over the script here. So first thing is just like tonality. I was watching this YouTube video that was talking about this, and you got to remember a lot of the people we're talking to, for one, they're old, they're all old. And then two, they're all ex-military, right? So what are they going to respond to? First off, they got to hear you because they're old, and then they're ex-military. So I feel like kind of, a stern, loud tone works well with these people. So that's when I'm not yelling at them, but I'm very loudly raising my voice. So when I give someone a call, like, hey, Bob, this is Joseph. I was just giving you a quick call from the Veterans Benefits Office. How are you doing today, sir? All right, perfect, Mr. Bob. So this call is just in regards to that request you had submitted for the new final expense and life options for veterans. I'm just the medical underwriter that's been assigned to your file. I have your date of birth listed here as June 15th, 1945. Is that correct? All right, perfect, sir. And then it also shows here on my side for your military status that you were an honorably discharged veteran. So thank you so much for your service. And then if it says like at the end of the thing, if it says they're in the Army, it says they're in the Navy or whatever, I'll include that. It says you were an honorably discharged veteran from the United States Army. So thank you so much for your service, sir. And then now, was your main concern, like most veterans, just wanting to make sure that the funeral expense doesn't fall a burden on any of your loved ones? They respond yes to that. It's going well. And then I kind of change this next line a little bit. I say, all right, got it. And were you also looking to try and leave a little extra behind as well, or mostly just worried about getting those expenses covered? And like when I'm talking to you guys like normal, you see, I'm like raising my voice a little bit louder. You know what I mean? And as I go through the script, I'll kind of tone down the yelling a little bit and try to build a little bit more rapport and be a little bit more personal with them. But I've had success just in the beginning part right here. Just raising my tone, raising my voice, it gets their attention more and it makes it feel like more legit. And I usually say veterans benefits instead of benefits for veterans. I think that was on the old script and it's kind of just in my head. I don't think that makes a huge difference. But besides that, I really don't change too much in this beginning part right here. Does anybody have any questions about just like the intro? Because obviously the intro is like the most important part. Does anybody have any questions right here?
Do you wait for them to respond after you ask or you say thank you for their service? Do you wait them for a bit? Like, do you wait for them to like acknowledge that?
I do. Yeah, usually. A lot of times they won't acknowledge it though. They'll kind of be like, okay, or they'll kind of just like pause. And if it's more than like a 3-second pause, then I just continue. But yeah, I typically wait for their response. They'll be like, well, thank you. And be like, you're very welcome, sir. And then, now is your main concern, and then go to the next line. But I'll definitely wait for response. A lot of times too, when I'm just saying, hey, Bob, I'll wait for them to be like, yeah, like, hey, Bob, this is Joseph. I was just giving you a quick call here from the Veterans Benefits Office. How are you doing today, Mr. Bob? Or how are you doing today, sir? I like to use people's first name a lot. I can't remember who I picked this up from, but there was a guy in the Zoom when I first started he would just like almost every sentence, and I don't do it as much as he did, but he's almost every sentence. He's like, yes, sir, Mr. Jim, or hey, Mr. Jim, or okay, and now Mr. Jim. And it's just like something about using somebody's name. It builds a little bit of rapport. It's just like a natural human tendency people like when you use their name. So I like to use people's first name a lot. Sometimes use the last name, usually just the first name, like Mr. Bob or Mr. Jim or whatever the hell their name is.
Hey, Joey, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Do you find it like, because I know in our past job, we would call them just like their straight name. Like if name was Jim, we would call him Jim, not Mr. Jim, because we're on level playing fields. You think because these people are older, they like the Mr., or do you sometimes just use their straight first name?
I'll sometimes use a straight first name. Again, it's just like kind of feeling them out, if I feel like they're a little bit cooler, they're one of the funny ones, like they like to crack jokes and whatnot, then I might use their first name. But I've had people like literally say to me, like, call me sir, you know what I mean? Like just because they're old. And I'm probably just in my head about that, but I just try to like make it feel like I'm being respectful. And again, I want it to feel like it's coming from as a legit, almost like they're getting a call from a fucking government office. You know what I mean? Then I feel like that's how they would be addressed if they were being called from the VA, if that was a thing, So I don't know. Yeah, I usually do say Mr.
All right. I hear you.
But obviously like this part here, and then if they're like, no, I already got that taken care of. Like, oh, okay, perfect, sir. So you already have your funeral or cremation costs taken care of, and then get another yes. Did you prepay through a funeral home, or did you already get some life insurance coverage in place? And then they say they prepaid for a funeral home, or they already have coverage in place. They have coverage in place. I immediately pivot into, okay, perfect. That makes my job a whole lot easier. Kind of like this little thing right here. Where does it say it right here? I already have coverage in place. Yep, makes my job a whole lot easier. Did you get that in place recently, or have you had it for a while? If they've had it for a while, you know you're not going to be able to beat their rate. If they got it in place recently, awesome. You can try to beat the rate or maybe just add more coverage. If they've had it in place for a long time, you know you're not going to be able to beat the rate. So at that point, it's just like, all right, figure out how much they have. If they have a small amount, awesome. You can try to pitch them basically on adding coverage to help cover costs. And typically how I'll go into that is they have like 10 or 20K. They're like, okay, perfect, Mr. Bob. It's awesome that you already do have some coverage, but do you know how much burials and cremations are nowadays? Tell them how much they are. But yeah, so what we've dealt with recently a lot is a lot of veterans have been reaching out to us so they can add a little bit of additional coverage to make sure all of those costs are taken care of and potentially leave some extra money behind for their loved ones. Was that kind of why you submitted this request, sir? And then obviously you're hoping to get a yes. But at the end of the day, guys, like I'm not flipping a whole lot of people who are just like, I have coverage, I have 100,000, like I'm good. Like I'm not saying anything magic that gets those people to flip, you know? I mean, there's been a few, but at the end of the day, it's not like I'm flipping a ton of these people. I'm just like, but the leads I do get that are good, like I'm making sure to sell them, you know? But at the end of the day, like I'm getting all the time I'm good. I have coverage. I filled this out on accident. I didn't realize what I was doing. Like, all right, no worries, man. Have a good day. Go to the next lead, you know? But besides that, even if they tell me they have coverage, I'm always going to try to exhaust every option. Like I'm going to be like, okay, perfect, sir. Then since you already prepaid that through a funeral home, when you submitted this request here, you were probably like most veterans where you were just looking to leave a little bit of additional money behind for your loved ones or your family, right, sir? And again, just being assumptive and trying to get them to agree with me in some aspect that they are looking for coverage, you know, just trying to get that first yes out of them. Obviously, you hope you get it when you just ask this question, right? But if not, I'm still going to try to push other ways to get that, whether it's adding coverage, adding additional coverage because the cost of burials have gone up, leaving extra money behind. I'll bring up debts like, okay, if they're like, no, I'm not trying to leave any money behind. I have my burial covered. Okay, perfect. Did you have any debts like a mortgage or a car payment or anything like that you wanted to add some coverage for? So what didn't create a financial hardship when you pass away? Like I'm just trying to attack it every angle. Once they tell me 4 or 5 times, like, no, I'm fucking good, then all right, hang up the phone, go to the next lead, you know? So that's pretty much it on the intro. The biggest thing that I wanted to touch on there is just the tonality. I've found it works, you know, instead of just like, hey, Bob, this is Joey. I was just giving you a quick call from the Veterans Benefits. How are you doing today? It's like, hey, Bob, this is Joseph. I was just giving you a quick call from the Veterans Benefits office. How are you doing today, sir? So it's just like more in their face. I've found more response and more conversations with that. And then
quick question, Joey.
Yeah.
Whenever you're talking to a guy and they say that, you know, they already have coverage, but they just took it out recently, and you can tell like they're a bit antsy, you definitely aren't about to go through like the whole entire script with them. Are you like kind of quit quoting them or like just skipping a bunch of steps, going to health questions? Like how do you go for just
You mean if they already have coverage in place recently, so they got 10K, $100 or whatever? Like they told you how much they have already?
Yeah, like they're like, yeah, I just took something out for like 10,000 for, you know, X amount of dollars, and then you're looking on your quote and it's a bit cheaper. Like, how are you going about that?
Yeah, so I would probably just say something like I would probably get them a quick price just to pique their interest and keep their attention on that. So I probably would say something like, okay, perfect, sir. Let me go ahead and check here if there's a veteran program, there's a veteran discounted program available for you that might save you a little bit of money to get the quote and be like, all right, perfect, sir. Not everybody does qualify for these, but if we were able to get you qualified for this, we'd be able to save, it would be the same amount of coverage with a double accidental or whatever it is, you know, kind of recap the benefits real quick. It's immediate, it's permanent. If it's double accidental, it's double accidental, builds cash value. This is a discounted whole life policy for veterans. And you'd be able to get the same amount of coverage, only with better whatever. You'd be able to get the same $10,000 of coverage, but it would only be $80 a month instead of the 100 that you're paying now. So what I can do, sir, is I can, you know, submit a request for coverage and see if we can get you approved for this. Okay. And save you a little bit of money. And then I would just go into the application, beneficiary, you know, basic health questions. I have gotten like, typically you don't just want to like quote people right off the bat, but in that situation I will. And I have gotten a couple deals where I can tell somebody's not in a really good time to talk, or for whatever reason, you just got to feel it out. If they're like super, super busy, and I'll if they're like, but yeah, I want $10,000 of coverage. Like, give me a price right now, or like, I don't have time to talk. I've gotten a couple deals. I mean, don't make this a habit, but like just from throwing them a price and be like, all right, full name, weight, address, and just run through the application real quick. It has happened, but again, it's like pretty rare. But with that situation, if you're trying to replace a policy, yeah, I would probably give them a quick price right off the bat.
Cool. And then you just jump straight into application, like you said, and then just
Yeah.
ask questions and whatnot from there.
Yeah, because obviously, like you don't. I mean, because at the end of the day, you don't really need all the health questions. The ones you really need are VA or civilian doctor, diabetes, COPD, cancer. Because if they have prostate cancer, you need to admit that to get approved sometimes, and then height and weight. The rest of them, I mean, you don't really need. We all know that,
Yeah.
But like before I ever drop price, even if it's like somebody where I'm going to give them a quote right off the bat for whatever reason, which I rarely do, but even if I do that, I typically will rehash the benefits first. So I'll say like all these policies for veterans, and just so you know, sir, before I go through the numbers, all these policies for veterans are immediate coverage plans. There's no 2-year waiting period if we get you approved or anything like that. It is also permanent coverage. These are discounted whole life policies for veterans, so they don't ever expire on you like a term policy would. If it has double accidental, I'll bring that up. I'll bring up, it does have a living benefits, so you are able to access some of the benefit early if you get terminally ill. It does build cash value and all of that. And then as far as the numbers, then I'll kind of go into that. So I'll rehash the benefits really quickly. But obviously in a real, most 99% of the time, I'm gonna go through them slowly and have them write it down. And then, so coming into anybody else have any questions on the first part? I know obviously the first part is where we lose most people, so. No? All right. Coming into this here, one thing I will do sometimes is if I feel like there's somebody who, I'm about 50-50 on this. If I feel like there's somebody who is a little bit more not as into it, you know what I mean? If I can have like what feels like a lay down, I'll just read this part like normal, right? But if I feel like they're going to be a little bit tougher, I don't have their interest yet, they're a little bit skeptical, whatever it is, I'll usually skip to this line right here. And I'll skip this part, sometimes skip it all together. Sometimes I come back to it. Again, it's just kind of feeling it out, guys. But a lot of times recently, I've just been jumping to this. And I'll say, so right after this line where it's like, were you like most veterans where you just want to get the funeral expense covered, doesn't fall a burden on your loved ones, whatever, after you say that part, like, all right, perfect, Mr. Bob. And now, God forbid, sir, if something happened to you and you were to pass away, who would be the beneficiary here? Who'd be paying for your funeral expenses and picking up the pieces for you tomorrow? I'll get the beneficiary. All right, perfect. And then how old is your daughter, Jennifer? All right, perfect. And then, Mr. Bob, would Jennifer be in a financial position to cover a funeral expense, or is that why you were looking into this, sir? All right, perfect. Yeah, no, I completely understand, sir. That's the same reason why most veterans send in these requests, just so that their loved ones aren't burdened with that expense. And have you thought about whether you wanted to be buried? And I'll try to get some sort of response after this too. Be like, yeah, no, I totally understand, sir. That's the same reason why most veterans send in these requests. Just nobody wants their loved ones to have to pay for that expense. And then hopefully they're like, yeah, I don't want to leave that burden on them. Like, all right, perfect. And then have you thought about whether you wanted to be buried or cremated one day? And then go over how much get the answer to that, go over how much that cost. Real quick too here, what the fuck's going on? Well, I have no idea what just happened to my screen. You'll see that?
I like copied that and made it huge.
Sorry, fellas. I don't know. I guess I just broke my script. But with the quoting here, so typically, I don't know why I can't fucking see it. That's annoying. But typically, I'll say burials are 10 to 20, in cremations, depending on how old they are. Sometimes I'll say 4,000 to 7,000. Just something I do a little bit different. I don't really know why I started that, because I feel like sometimes, if somebody's 88 years old, like a $5,000 policy is going to be like $170 a month, So if they're really old like that, sometimes I'll say, cremation, or if their cost benefit, if what they think, they're like, oh, cremation's only $1,200. We've all heard that, right? We all know it can be done for that much, but that's like they burn the body, throw it in a bag. There's no funeral, there's no memorial, nothing, right? That doesn't include like a plot or anything like that, or any box or whatever, urn. So I'll be like, yes, sir. If they say like $1,200, their price expectation is really low. So I don't want to be like, it's five times what you think it is. So a lot of times with that, if they say it's like, I'll never really go below 3,000, But if they say it's like, oh yeah, I can get it done for like 1,200, I'd be like, yeah, you can get it done for about $1,500, $2,000 nowadays if it's literally just burn it and they do no kind of memorial or service or anything like that. But typically with the cremation, it's going to be anywhere from $3,000 to $7,000 nowadays, just depending on the fanciness of the celebration, the type of memorial that they go with, and the urn that the family selects, and that sort of thing. And then burials, I'm usually going to say 10 to 20, no matter what. And then after that, when you can't really read it right here, annoyingly, but it says, God damn it, what does it say? It says, do you have anything put aside somewhere in a significant savings, or do you have a life insurance policy that would cover that cost? God forbid if something were to happen to you. I changed that. And what I say is, I don't like bringing up the savings, because if you bring up savings, I've definitely lost deals right there where they're like, oh yeah, I have money at the bank. You know what? Actually, I'm good. And then the call's over, So I always say the way I change this line is to, besides what I help you with today, do you have any existing life insurance policies that would help cover this cost? God forbid if something did happen to you, Mr. Bob, or whatever. So the way I say it is, besides what I help you with today, do you have any sort of existing life insurance policies that would help cover this cost? Or would this be the first one? Sometimes I'll add that in there to be even more assumptive. But I don't love this line that they have that's in the script right here, just because I feel like it can give them an easy out. Does anybody else do anything differently on this page or have any questions? And then, like, again, I will read this part of the script right here, but not always. Again, I'd say I probably read this 60-70% of the time, but a lot of times recently I have just been jumping right into this, because when you're asking for that beneficiary, it's like it's building. That's the first pain point. Like, that's building. This is the why, right? So it's like when you bring up their daughter and they start thinking about how they're gonna have to pay, their daughter's gonna have to pay for their funeral or burial, like that's what's going to keep them interested in the conversation, And this is just kind of a long paragraph right here, and it kind of tells them like, hey, we're going to be on the phone for a minute, So I feel like a lot of times if they're in a rush, or you can tell they're not as into the call and it just doesn't feel like a lay down, I'll typically go right here first, just because it grabs their attention a little bit more, where this can kind of just like make people drone out, and they're just like, oh, can we do this or whatever, You guys kind of agree with that? Anybody do that or do anything different? No? Do you guys like that? Like just skipping to this part? Has anybody tried that at all? Or is everybody just been reading this paragraph first no matter what?
I do try to dig into the why before telling them what we'll do, just to kind of set that hook and get them to stay on the line with me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I kind of numb it down a little bit. Like sometimes I've gotten a lot of like pushback of just like, I'm just going on like a long-winded rant with some of this. So I've been trying to like numb it down a little bit.
And what you can even do too, what I'll do sometimes is I'll go over this, I'll go through all this, and then I'll go over this, right? So I'll go through this part first, the why, how much it's going to cost. Do you already have anything in place already? And then I'll read this. And how I read this, I change it a tiny bit. So I'll say, all right, perfect, sir. So what we'll do is we'll spend about a minute or so on yourself and your financial situation, just to make sure everything is affordable and within the budget. Typically, we don't have any problems because these were designed for veterans on a fixed income, like Social Security or disability. And then a quick note there, if they're not over 65, I'll say, which you're probably not even using yet, just to like make it feel more personal. And then I'll say, and then we'll spend a minute on your health. And that's just going to help me navigate which one of the 26 VA approved carriers would most likely give you the approval today. Does that make sense, sir? So the only thing I really changed, instead of A rated, I just say VA approved. I don't know why.
I think I'm going to try that. I like that a lot, digging into the why earlier, because I feel like that part can be a lot to ask for right off the bat sometimes.
Right. And also, too, I think Marvin told me this at the convention in Florida. The reason why he does this and the reason why he started doing it is because it's like, all right, for one, you're building the why first. You're getting them interested, going over how much it's going to cost, building that pain. And then also right here, what you're doing is you're saying, all right, we're going to spend a minute on your financial situation. Then we're going to go over your health. And then if you say that right there, the next thing you're doing is go over their financial situation. So it's like, it's almost like laying the groundwork of like, all right, if this guy says I'm going to do something, then we're about to fucking do it, because you just told him you're going to go over the situation. and then you go over the financial situation. Instead of saying, I'm going to go over the financial situation and then digging the beneficiary, it almost doesn't make as much logical sense, you know? So that's just like another reason to do it. But yeah, I do like doing this part pretty much right after the intro. Again, like it's 50-50. It just depends on if I feel like it's an easy phone call and they're giving me the time of day and they're already bought in, or they're not. If they're bought in and they're like, yeah, I need to get burial covered, and you're like, all right, bet, then I'll just start here. But you know, it's just one of those things, you got to feel them out. And then with the income, I've heard people say this. I've never once said, and then we'll take you into the client suitability sheet. If you say that and you like saying that, cool. But I didn't even know this was like a part of the script. And I've heard a lot of people say it, but I don't ever say that. I'm just like, all right, perfect, sir. And then as far as your current situation goes, are you currently working, retired, or disabled? If they say working, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, sir. You're still getting after it. Retired. I can't wait to say I'm retired one day myself. And then obviously try to make a joke out of that. Disabled, I'll just be like, usually they'll say like retired, disabled, and I'll still just go with retirement joke line. And then here, and then a Juan, I think you said you do this, and I kind of like what you do, so I kind of started doing that as well. But and then with your current Social Security or disability, or what I'll typically say actually for this is, and then it's with your Social Security and any other retirement income you may have, what do you typically bring in per month, just to the ballpark, sir? And then if it's like 5, 6, 7 grand a month, if it's 4 grand or over a month, we're like, oh, perfect, sir, you guys are doing great. And then at the end of the month, once you pay all the bills and utilities and do all the fun things you like to do, what are you, and if it's married, like what are you and the missus typically left over with? And then, you know, obviously I'm writing these down. And then reason why I like to get the income is just because you know how to reasonably quote them. And I've still closed plenty of people who have said, oh, I'm left over with nothing at the end of the month. Like, you know, they're obviously exaggerating or lying, but so don't let that scare you if they do say that. But if, you know, they have 1,500, they say they have 2 grand left over at the end of the month, then you know if they start giving you objections at the very end, that it's not really a price objection, that they can't afford it because they told you they have 1,500, 2 grand left over, or whatever it is. It's probably just they don't trust you, or they don't know if they need the coverage at all, or they're probably wondering if they can get a better rate somewhere else. So you kind of know it's not that objection if they tell you they have a lot of money left over. If they tell you that they're broke, then that might be a legit concern of theirs, that they can't afford this. And obviously they want to keep food on the table more than they want to worry about their, you know, daughter not having to pay for their funeral. So, you know, at that point you might quote a little bit lower of packages. Because obviously I'd rather sell a package for 50, 60 bucks a month versus quoting for 100 to 150 and not get any deal at all, you know? So you just got to keep that in mind, you know? And that's another reason why with Bear, like sometimes when I'm telling them how much funerals and cremations can be, sometimes I'll lower the bottom range down a little bit, just because I'd rather, you know, sell them $8,000 of coverage for a burial versus quoting 12 to 20. I'd rather quote someone who's poor 8, 10, 12, or 8, 10, or 8, 12, 15 versus 12, 15, 20, you know, because I'd rather get some deal than no deal. And then after the income, so obviously I get the income, you write that down. After the income, all right, perfect, sir. So there are 2 additional discounts that you may qualify for on top of being a veteran. So I always say it like that. So there are 2 additional discounts that you may qualify for on top of being a veteran. First being, sir, are you a smoker or a non-smoker? They say they're a smoker. I'll say, plan on quitting anytime soon? And then usually they'll say yes. But even if they don't, I'll usually throw almost like a little joke in there. I'll be like, well, sir, there is a little bit of a discount for saying that you plan on quitting smoking. So you just have to tell me that you do. I'll ask them again, do you plan on quitting? And then they'll say yes. Like, all right, perfect, sir. Just keep that one between us. So I'm trying to like make it feel like I'm on their side, right? I'm sure if they're a smoker, if they're a non-smoker, just like, all right, perfect, sir. Well, then you definitely qualify for that discount. Just don't start smoking anytime soon, okay? And then usually, you know, get a laugh out of that. But like they said, that's like kind of a big thing for me is that I feel like I do a little bit different. If they say they're a smoker, I'm like, well, sir, if you tell me you plan on quitting, I can apply a little bit of a discount for you. So I'm going to ask you again, do you plan on quitting anytime over the next couple of years? And then, because we all know, like, guys, if they go to the VA, we're putting non-smoker no matter what, right, on the applications and hoping to get approved. And usually it does. So it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But I want them to feel like throughout the whole thing, like anytime you have a chance to personalize it or make them feel like you're on their side and you're doing them a favor, like take advantage of that, kind of like how, for us that used to sell solar, like you use little tricks like, all right, like if, with like give them a first 2 months for free, like don't tell my boss, but I can give you the first 2 months for free, like whatever you want to say, right? Kind of the same thing. Just want to make them feel like you're on their side. And then getting the bank, I've heard of some people having issues with getting the bank. I've never had an issue. And how I ask, all right, perfect, sir. And then the next discount, I see that you live in the state of California, correct? So this is how I lead into the banking question. I'm not just like, what's the name of the bank that you use? I'll say, all right, perfect, sir. So I see that you live in the state of California, correct? Again, more personalization makes it feel like you're doing your job. You're supposed to be there. You already have their information. All right, perfect, sir. So in the state of California, the veteran programs, they do give you a little bit of an additional discount for using a bank that's partnered with the veterans. Do you use a federal bank or a military branch credit union? And then they'll usually just be like, if they use Navy Fed or USAA, obviously they'll tell you, oh, I use a military, I use Navy Fed. But you 99% of the time, it was like, oh, I just use a normal bank. Like, all right, perfect, sir. As long as another veteran has used your bank before, they'll be on our discount list. I'll go ahead and double check here. What's the name of the bank that you use? And then obviously get the name of their bank and then, write that down so you know for later. And if you guys don't know why, and then I'll usually ask, and then, okay, perfect. And you opened that in Texas, correct, sir? Or whatever state they're in. You opened that in California, right, sir? All right, perfect. Just to double check, just because the routing number does depend on the state they opened it in. So if they live in Texas, but they used to live in Florida and they opened the bank and say they have Wells Fargo, they opened it in Florida, but they now live in Texas. When you later go to look up, routing number for Huntington Bank, Michigan, whatever, most states, if you do, it will be a different number depending on some banks. It's the same. Yeah, see, this bank's different, 0441590. But if you open it in Illinois, it's 04 whatever 24. So you want to note that just because when you're getting the banking at the very end, it comes from a lot more credible place if you have the routing number and you have it correct. So just make sure to note that. And again, I always just like how I ask for that is, so you live in I see you live in California, correct, sir? All right, perfect. So with the veteran programs, they do give you a little bit of an additional discount for using a veterans partnered bank. Do you use a federal bank or a military branch credit union? Just a normal bank. So I'll see if they're on the discount list here. As long as another veteran has already used them, they will be in our system. What's the name of the bank that you use? And then get the bank. Going over the health. Sorry, any questions on the discounts or the income, anything like that? Anybody do anything different? All right. Yeah, simple. Health. I mean, I'm not going to beat dead horse on this. These are very simple. This simple part of the script. Try to get through it quick as I can. Really, for most of your medical needs, VA or civilian doctor. Any heart attacks, strokes, blah blah blah. And if they do, I'll say blood thinners. Then I'll name some common blood thinners. I do feel like it adds a little bit of credibility when you know the names of medications. So, diabetes, yes or no? Yes. You take metformin or insulin. Neuropathy, blah, blah, blah. I don't really do anything different with these. If they say yes, I do name the medications. The only thing I will add here is there is another high blood pressure medication that's pretty common called losartan. So if you guys want to throw that one in there, a lot of people do take losartan. And I'd say lisinopril and amlodipine are the most commonly used, though. I've barely had anybody tell me they use Metoprolol. So I honestly don't even say this a lot of times. I'll say, you take lisinopril, amlodipine, losartan. There's another one called hydrochloroside. So I'll sometimes bring those up. And then, yeah, I don't do anything different there. All right, perfect, sir. So just bear with me for 1 or 2 minutes here. I'm going to go ahead and punch all this into the VA system and see what the best option available for you is. And then I don't think I change anything here, guys. Again, I'm keeping my tone. I'm getting through it. But one thing I will say here is I've seen a lot of people on Zoom. They'll like tell them they're going to put them on a hold for a second. I've never like put somebody on hold and built the package or done anything like that. Typically, I'm like, at this point, I have the script memorized. And if you don't have the script memorized, that's totally fine. You will eventually. But while I'm asking the health questions or whatever, I'm almost like building the packages. Like I'm asking the health questions, writing down their answers while I'm building the packages a lot of times. So a lot of times I'll like have this, I'll be doing this while I'm fucking, asking the health question. So I'm writing that down in my notebook while I'm going over the health questions, or at the very latest while I'm going over this, or while I'm going over like the benefits. Typically right here, I'm already, before I get to this next part about the ID card, I'm already texting them the ID card while I'm reading this part right here. So I'll send, and then I know not everybody has every state license, but when I started, I bought all 40 or 49 states, whatever that we use. So I send them, if you have the state license that they're in, highly recommend. Let me see here if I can show you guys how I set it up in my notes. Oh, there we go. Hold on. Where is it? It looks different on my phone. Sorry.
I like that I'm the top recruit.
Yes, sir. All right. I don't know why. On my phone, I have like a folder, but as you can see here, I have like a folder in my notes for every single state. And then I'll go to that state. I highly recommend you guys do that. I'll go to that state if I have that. Well, I have all the state licenses, but if you have that state license, send them a copy of that state license, and then also send them a copy of that little credential card as well. On my phone, it looks different. It looks like I don't know if you guys can see this. Yeah, but I have like that little folder for state licenses. So I'll click in there, go to the state that I need, say it's Minnesota, boom, copy it, and then I'll text it to them. And then along with my state, the credential card as well. So as I'm going through this thing right here, I send them a copy of the credential card of my state license. Then when I come down here, again, I'm not doing anything differently. I read this exactly verbatim. Only line I take out is this: due to all the shenanigans going on. It's just never felt right to me to say that. I don't know why. I just felt like it's a goofy line, and it makes them like, I don't know. I always felt like it might sketch people out. So I'll just say, all right, perfect, sir. So there's a new protocol here in the state where I just legally have to send you over a copy of my Department of Insurance license while we're on the phone, just so that you have it for your records, so you know who's helping you out today. So I just texted you a picture of my 2 images, sir. The first one is just a copy of my Department of Insurance license for the state of California, has my license number and all of my credentials on there. And then after that, I send you my Veterans Office contact card, which just contains my full name, my NPN number right underneath that, which is like my employee social security number. And then there's even a picture of me, just so that you can know the face behind the voice and know who you're working with today. Okay, sir? And then if they're like a funny guy, sometimes I'll be like, just so you can see the ugly mug that you're talking to, just so you can know who's helping you out. I'll try to throw a joke in there or whatever. But typically I don't really change too much. I do feel like bringing up the picture of the face is good though, because people are curious, like if somebody's talking to you for 20 minutes, like I don't want to know what they look like, so that bringing that up will get people to look at it. And I feel like when they look at it, it's a good thing, because a lot of times, I know I've closed plenty of deals where they're concerned about giving me the banking or social or whatever it is. And I'll just be like, have you looked at my state license, sir? And they're like, oh no, I didn't look at that. I'm like, well, go ahead and look. And then like they see it. I'm like, all right, what's your social? So I feel like getting them to look at it if you can is good. And then, all right, perfect, sir. I'm going to give you some information about the benefits that come with this type of plan, specifically for our veterans. Do you have a pen and paper handy, sir? And like, no. Like, well, could you grab one, or is it too big of a deal for you right now? Or if they're like out about driving, whatever. If they cannot write it down, I don't like trip over it. I'm just like, all right, no worries, sir. I'll go ahead and text you. These benefits, and I'll just read them aloud to you as well. Okay, sir? And I'll just text them these benefits. Just like I don't text them the whole paragraph, just like the words that are underlined here. I don't really change anything here. I pretty much read this exactly verbatim. The only thing I'd say I'd change a little bit is the double accidental. If they're 75 or younger, say, all right, perfect, sir. And then the next benefit here, you can write down double accidental payout. If they're a sharp person, sometimes I'll say it's also referred to as double indemnity, but we call it the double accidental payout. So what that means, sir, is that if your cause of death is any sort of accident, like a car accident, slip and fall, choke, drown, any sort of accidental death, and the coverage amount for Jennifer would double. I don't really say this last line because honestly, I don't really understand what it even means. Like that's just like an accidental. It's just included in your policy as well. It just doesn't even make logical sense to me. So I don't say that. But I'll just say any sort of accident. And I start with car accident. I don't know why. I don't really think it matters. That's just what I do. And then lastly here, sir, this is permanent coverage. This coverage will never expire on you. these are whole life policies specifically for veterans, so they don't expire at any certain age. So I like to add in there another for veterans, just make it feel more targeted, more special. Again, like they're talking to somebody from a government office, Anybody have any questions on the credential card, the benefits, anything like that before we go to quoting and finish up here? All right. And then again, I read this pretty much verbatim. I'm going to try to skip over the parts I read verbatim just to keep this call, reasonably, because we've already been on for 40 minutes and I know it's Sunday, guys. But, based on what you told me, blah, 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 I pretty much say this. Sometimes I'll change affordable to comfortable, and I don't have a rhyme or reason why. Sometimes I do say affordable. I don't know why. I'm just telling you guys what I do. But then for the most part, I say affordable, All right, can you write down for me bronze, silver, and gold, just like the medals in the Olympics there, bronze, silver, and gold. I don't always use the Olympics line, but if they're like a little bit older or whatever, they can't really hear as well, I will. Was somebody about to say something? Sorry.
No, I just have a question. You're not really there yet, but when you are quoting them and they're below 75, so they might be able to get an IUL, I'm wondering how you're throwing that in there as well.
So the only time I'll do an IUL is if they're extremely healthy, just because, IULs are a lot harder to qualify for, at least in my experience. But if they're extremely healthy and I can tell like they're younger, they're extremely healthy, and they aren't dead broke, that's when I'm going to go for an IUL. And if I'm going for an IUL, I'll know that after the health questions. And at that point, obviously, I read the benefits differently. So with the IUL living benefit, it's 80%. And then also the cash value part is different. And then there's no double accidental. So, but everything else is the same. So how I read the living benefit is just exactly like this, but 80%. Cash value, how I'd say that with an IUL is, and with this, sir, as you pay your premiums into the policy, it will build cash value over time. So they guarantee you with the cash value of your policy, they guarantee a minimum of 2.9% return on your money, no matter what. So it's a lot better than sitting in a bank account, but it's tied to the S&P 500 index. So as the market does good, it will participate in that as well. So the average return on your cash value is 5.9%. Okay. And I'll make sure they understand that. But that's really the only difference. And then there's no double accidental with an IUL. But I'd say, Christian, I go for it when they're not dead broke and they're healthy. And then I'll do if they're just looking for burial or cremation or whatever coverage, I'll do 25, 35, 45. But if again, they had mentioned they want more coverage, then we know that from the get-go. And then it's going to be an IUL the whole way through. And I'll do depending on what they want, if they want 50K in coverage, I'll do 30, 50, 75, something like that, and again, and then same thing with quoting, even if you're doing a whole policy, which is 95% of what we do, if they're broke, and they're telling me they only have $50 left over at the end of the month and they plan on being buried, I'll probably give them an $8,000 option, a $10,000 option, and a $15,000 option, right? I'm almost trying to set it up to where I want them to pick the silver package. At least that's how I'm thinking about it in my head. And then again, if they're really old, and they're going to be cremated, I'll do 3, 5, 7 or something like that. But if they're younger cremated, I'll do 7, 10, 15, again, it just depends on what the premiums are. I want to try to make it to where usually my silver package is $90 to $100. Usually my bronze is 60 to 80. Usually my gold's 120 to 200, just depending again on how much they want, what they've told me, and how much I think they can afford and what they're likely to do. Again, it's just kind of feeling it out, if they're dead broke, quote lower packages. If they have money, they make 5, 6K a month, they're 100% disabled, they're getting 4K a month disability plus Social Security. By the way, if you guys don't know that, if you're 100% disabled, they get between $3,900 and $4,600 a month. So just a note there. But yeah, so as far as these go here, when I'm reading these off, I don't really change too much at all. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I change anything, but I don't really change too much on these word tracks right here. One thing I will do is once I go through it, I'll be like, all right, sir. And then just to reiterate here, or just to recap here, so we have that. And of course, if they have the double accident or under, I'll say, of course, in the event of an accidental death, all coverage amounts would double. But that bronze option again, sir, just to make sure we're on the same page, was $8,000 of coverage for 110 or say 70. That silver option was $12,000 of coverage for 95. And then that gold option was $15,000 of coverage, and that was 130 with your veterans discount. So I like to recap them one more time just before I ask for the closing question, just because, like, I don't know, I feel like, again, bringing it back to solar, which a lot of us sold, it's like, imagine just dropping numbers and then just being like, all right, when's the best time to schedule a site survey? It's like, you got to have a little bit of time for it to marinate, right? Or else it's just like, they're not going to have time to make the mental decision yet. And again, these are older people. They don't think as quick. So I recap the prices one more time after I have them write it down. And then I'll say, all right. And then given those three options, sir, the gold, the silver, and the bronze, which one makes the most sense for you? I just say it exactly like that. Obviously, in an ideal situation, they say, oh, the gold or the bronze or whatever. Like, all right, perfect, sir. And then, so what we'll do is we'll send in a request for coverage, but obviously we all know that doesn't always happen. So if they're like, oh, I want to think about it, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Obviously I'll typically ask the question of, all right, yeah, totally makes sense, sir. And then obviously we do recommend at least applying, because we still got to make sure we can get you approved for this sort of thing. With you though, sir, is it more so of which package you want to go with, or whether you need the coverage at all? Or if they're just unsure about it, if they're like, maybe the bronze, maybe the silver, I got to think about it. I would just say, may I make a recommendation, sir? All right. So obviously our job is to help you guys get some coverage in place in case something happens to you. So what we really recommend is just going for whatever we think you can afford. So for right now, sir, what we would recommend doing is just applying for the bronze option. That way you have some immediate coverage in place in case, God forbid, something happens to you. And once we get you approved, if you ever want to increase the coverage later down the road, you always can. Does that make sense, sir? And then typically they'll say yes. I'm like, all right, perfect. So what we'll do is we'll send in a request for coverage for this bronze or silver option. And then that's kind of how I close them there. So I'll usually say, may I make a recommendation for you, sir? Just to repeat this one more time. So obviously it's our job to make sure that you guys have some coverage in place in case something happens to you, so that Jennifer is protected. So what we usually do is we can just apply for, say, the bronze or the silver option. That way you have some immediate coverage in place in case something happens. And then, because we still have to see if we can get you approved. And then once you get approved, you can always increase the coverage later in the future. Does that make sense, sir? Perfect. And then go to the application. That's probably how I close like 60% of people, honestly. It's just like, well, let's just apply for something so you have some immediate coverage for Jennifer. And then once we get you approved, God willing, you can always increase the coverage later in the future. Does that make sense, sir? All right, wonderful. And then I just move on. Just very assumptive. And then again, like if it's just, I want to think about it, talk to my wife. What do you think your wife's biggest questions or concerns would be? Okay, blah, blah, blah. Try to handle them, again, guys, like this is sales. We can talk for like hours about this, but again, a lot of times it's just looping people until you can get them to, agree that they need coverage. Like, would you agree that some coverage is better than no coverage? Like there's a million different lines you could use here. Anybody else have anything they do differently, or any questions right here about this when they're like, I want to think about it? What are you guys struggling with here? Basically, I should ask that.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I do the completely against. Like, would you think your wife would be completely against you putting a policy in place so she doesn't have to come out of pocket to let you to rest properly? That's what I usually do, like to get them back in. They're kind of hesitant on heading out.
Yeah, I like that line. And again, it's just like with their another line I'll use sometimes that they're like, oh, I just don't know if I can afford it or whatever. I'll be like, sir, and I completely understand here. And the last thing we want to do is take food off the table or anything like that. But at the end of the day, sir, if we can't come up with $60 a month to, add some protection here, how do you think your wife is going to be able to come up with $10,000 when you do pass away? It's a kind of a rough in their face line, kind of mean, but it's true,
That's fire.
So it's like, I'll say anything. Like, fuck, dude. I'll make them hang up the phone on me. You know, like at the end of the day, guys, callbacks don't really work. So you just kind of got to go at it with the aspect of, even if you can't think of something, just fucking take a second and just be like, well, just give me 1 second here, sir. Let me look at this. And then just like think of something to say, you know, like just try your damn best, because at the end of the day, 99% of the time, if they say they want to think about it, they want to talk to their sister, their brother's dog, or whoever the fuck they want to talk to, they're probably either not going to, 90% of the time, they won't even answer the phone when you call them back. And then the other 9% of the time, they're going to tell you they thought about it. They talked to their sister. They already have coverage in place now all of a sudden, or they don't need it, or my son's going to take care of the funeral. He's good with it, you know, whatever it is. So it's like, and then maybe that 1% of the time, they might be like, oh, yeah, you know what? I do want to do that. Yeah. Like I've had it happen like 2 or 3 times in like the last year. So it's just know that it's probably not going to work out. So you really have nothing to lose by burning the bridge and just like pushing for it as hard as you can when it comes to getting these people closed. I mean, there's just, and when you go into it at that mindset, you'll think of something to say, versus if you like have the hopium of getting a callback. And I'm not, if you get callbacks, like awesome. I personally don't. They hardly ever work out for me. Literally think it's happened 2 or 3 times ever. And I've probably called back 200 people. So that's just the mindset I have about it. And I think that's just, you know, a good mindset to have. Same thing. I hate to keep referencing solar, but I know we all sold it. Like once you leave the house, you don't fucking get them the sign it's cooked, right? So that's kind of the same mindset I have going into it here. So, and again, guys, like a lot of the things that I'm saying right here, if you just look up, like I've looked up on YouTube and I'll listen to it while I'm at the gym, while I'm walking scout, final expense. I want to think about it, closing questions, like stuff like that. Just look up stuff on YouTube. There's so many people out there, so much content that's so good with life insurance because it's such a big industry. But
Joey,
you know, yeah.
When you get the ones that were kind of withholding from you that all they want is the quote, and you get through the numbers and they try to make you wrap it up like, all right, awesome, you know, like that's all I needed, or can you send me this, or have you had success kind of tying them back into the why and keeping them on the phone there?
Yeah. So if they're like, all right, perfect. Like say you go over numbers and they're just like, yeah, all right, great. Can you send me this in the mail?
Yeah.
Yeah. So typically my line for that is like, well, sir, they will send you a physical policy packet in the mail, sir, but we still have to submit a request for coverage and see if we can get you approved. Okay. And then I'll try to get them to pick a package. But like, so given the 3 options, which one worked best for you? And then ideally they'll say a package. And then I'm like, all right. And then I just go to the application. So we still, before they can send you anything in the mail, sir, we do have to get you approved through underwriting. So I have to answer a couple more questions here just to confirm some information for me. Okay. And then I'll just try to continue the application. But I'll usually, so my line basically, Christian, is just like, yes, sir. And they will send you a physical policy packet in the mail, but we still have to apply for this and see if we can get you medically approved. Does that make sense?
Nice.
All right.
That's good. Yeah. Thanks.
Yes, sir. And again, like they have these blue things here on how to overcome these. Obviously, these are good too. So start here, you know. And then with the application, guys, perfect. I read this basically verbatim. I'm not going to go over that because I literally read it verbatim. I do ask this. What I change on this golden question right here is I'll say, all right, perfect. Does that make sense? So you end right here. Does that make sense? All right. And then, sir, or Mr. Bob, I'm assuming this is something you've been thinking about for a little while, getting some permanent coverage in place here to protect your wife. And then, so that's how I ask this question. And then I'm assuming this is something you've been thinking about for a while, getting some permanent coverage in place here to protect insert beneficiary name. So that's how I ask that question. With this, if they have a very simple name like Ronald Johnson, I'll usually be like, all right, perfect, sir. I know this sounds kind of silly, but I just have to confirm the spelling of your first and last name for you. And then I'll spell it out. If they have a weird name or it's a potential nickname like Jim, Pete, Tony, Joe, Bob, any name that could be a potential nickname, right? And you got to realize there's a lot of them. Like Jim is short for James. Bob, obviously Robert, Dick, Robert, Philip. Yeah, exactly. So if they have a nickname, if they have a name like that that's showing on your lead list, I'll have them spell it. Because the last thing I want to fucking do is I want to be like, so your legal name is Jim, right? And they're like, no, it's James. And when you're about to ask for their social, that's a little weird, right? Again, want to come from that credibility aspect as much as possible. So I'll be like, so if they have a nickname name, what I say is, all right, sir. And then just for legal reasons, I know this sounds kind of silly, but I have to have you spell your first and last legal name. So can you please spell your first and last legal name for me? And there's been so many times when it's like the name I was calling them was like not even in his name. You know what I mean? So recommend doing that if they have a nickname. Confirm the height and weight. All right, sir, you will get a physical policy packet in the mail. What's the best mailing address for you? Is this phone number we're using right now that ends in 5687? Is this the best number for you? Perfect. Do you have an email you want me to put on file? And then I'll usually say, and then were you born there in if whatever state they're in, I'll usually say, I don't just say, where were you born? I'm just like, were you born there in Texas as well, sir? And then it's like, no, I was born in Michigan. I'm like, all right, Michigan. And then I usually don't even ask the city because it doesn't really matter unless you're doing an IUL. And then leading up to social, like, okay. And then obviously, sir, you are a U.S. citizen, correct? All right, perfect. Yeah, I know it. I just have to ask. And then for the medical underwriting, what is your social? And that's how I asked for the social. For the longest time, up until a couple of weeks ago, I just said, and then what's your social? And that works fine as well. Again, you just want to make it smooth and simple. But obviously, this is one of the biggest objections, right? So I'll say, and then for the medical underwriting, what is your social? If you get the objection of, do I have to give that to you? But yes, sir, that's how medical records, okay? Like, all right. And sometimes you'll get it like that. Again, if they give you like a small pushback, like, do I have to give that to you? Be like, yes, sir, that's how they verify your medical records. And then just pause, wait for them to give it to you. And then again, if they're, what do I typically say here? If they're like, oh, I don't really feel like I get comfortable giving that out over the phone. Yeah, no, sir. I usually hit it from like the feel, felt, found, right? So, but yes, sir, I totally understand. Most veterans that I work with feel the same way, but this information in this line is secure. The reason why they need that is because when they do the underwriting for this sort of thing to see if they can approve you, they have to have your social because that's how they pull your medical records from the Medical Information Bureau. Does that make sense? All right, perfect, sir. What's your social? Something like that. Or then if that doesn't work, I'll say that again, but I'll add in the death certificate line, like the only thing on your social is your death certificate. They still don't feel, or the death certificate is your social. That way Jennifer can get paid out. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. What's your social? They still don't give it to me. Then I'll have them pull up my text messages, look at my credentials. Like, so I am a licensed appointed agent here, sir. At the end of the day, I'm just doing my job, but they do require, and then sometimes I'll even ask, have you ever gotten a life insurance application before? And they're like, no. Well, this is required for life insurance applications. Okay. Like, there are regulations and privacy laws. They have to verify your identity. They have to make sure that you are the real Mr. Bob Johnson. And that's also how they verify your medical records. Does that all make sense? I'll kind of just keep reiterating until they fucking give it to me. And again, having them look at my credentials, having them look at my contact card, that stuff helps as well. But again, it's just like picking a package. Like, I'll say whatever I got to say, and I'll keep it going until they hang up on me, And then, of course, once I get the social, I always just read it back to them very slowly and clearly just to make sure it's correct. And again, with the social, it's just like, I think it's important to not like over explain, especially when they give you the initial pushback. If you they're like, oh, I don't know do I have to give that to you? And then you go into like a 2-minute long rant about why they need to give it to you. It's almost a little bit sketchier than just being like, yes, sir, they do require that for the application. Like, I've gotten so many socials just by saying that, so just don't over explain. I think that's kind of a big thing. And then you can explain more and more if they keep giving you pushback, but like, keep it simple, concise, and just confident, all right. Yep. I say this, I reconfirm the medical questions. I reconfirm their prescriptions. If they have them, you use amlodipine for the high blood pressure. You have an inhaler for the COPD, blah, blah, blah. Reconfirm the beneficiary and the age of the beneficiary. If they're married, sometimes I'll throw in the joke of how long you have been married for. Oh, 40 years. What's the secret? I'm getting married in 6 months, or, say something like that. Right. And then I usually I'm going to try to wrap it up here, guys. I know we've been on for an hour. I'm sorry. I usually just do this one, the low income word track. Again, I have their banking pulled up. What did I just broke my thing again. All right. And then I say this pretty much verbatim. Perfect. It looks like we are partnered with Chase Bank in our state system. That just means that another veteran has already used them before, so they're already on file. 9 out of 10 times, the routing number that it automates for me is correct. It should be 311742. Could you grab a checkbook to confirm it for me, sir? And then so I like to read their routing number to them before I even ask for the checkbook. Because it's like, I think about it like it's giving them something to go verify. I'm like, I'm telling them it's this, go check. That just has made logical sense to me versus just being like, it's usually correct. Can you grab a checkbook? I don't know. That's just what I do, but I'm sure I know both ways work. And if they don't have a checkbook, they're out and about, whatever it is. Like, all right, no worries, sir. We can get your name. They just have to make sure that the payment method matches your name. So we could use a card, put a card on file for now to get this application approved. Did they give you a Visa or a MasterCard? And that's how I asked for a card. So again, I'll say that one more time. Just if they're like, oh, I can't find a checkbook. I don't have a checkbook. I'm driving, whatever. All right, that's no problem, sir. They do have to make sure that the payment method for this thing matches your name. There are anti-money laundering laws about this sort of thing. But we can just put a card on file for now. Is that a Visa or a MasterCard that they gave you? Again, just very assumptive. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not going to go over this part because this is simple. Anybody have any questions about banking? Anything different they're doing? Sorry, guys. I feel like this training was a lot more boring than I anticipated because I really don't change much. The biggest thing I feel like I change is how I ask for the banking a little bit differently, bringing up the medical underwriting for the social, and then I don't like this line right here, and then saying this before this. That's about it. I think bringing up the savings is a mistake personally. So I think this is a better way to say this line right here is just, and besides what I help you with today, sir, do you have any sort of existing life insurance policies that would help cover that cost? Or would this be the first thing for you? And then that's pretty much it. Sorry, I'm not meaning to go off the script though. We can keep going. Does anybody have any questions about like the banking or anything like that? No. Word. Well, this went a lot longer than I anticipated, so I'm thankful for you guys hopping on. Was this helpful at all? Like a little bit, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah, bro, dropping some heat.
Okay.
I think
I appreciate it.
I think you introing just being so authoritative and loud is super critical too.
Yeah,
I needed that, honestly. I've been lacking in that department.
dude. I mean,
That's my hardest part.
As the conversation goes on, I'll kind of drop my tone a little bit, but I don't know, just speak loud. Like you got to remember, these are old people, and they were in the military, so they respond well to authority a lot of the times, So it's just like I don't know, and it just almost like builds urgency. You know what I mean? It's just like, do you have anything in place, motherfucker? Like I'm not like actually acting like that or screaming, but it does something. It like activates something. You know what I mean? To where it's just like they listen to you and they take you more seriously. So definitely recommend speaking up. Yeah, and just like almost like a monotone, like authoritative voice. That's kind of how I look at it. And then the further I get into it, the more I'll crack jokes and the more I'll become a human and the more I'll build rapport with them. But especially in that intro, like I am being pretty authoritative, pretty firm, pretty loud. So yeah, that's huge.
Do you think we could, just on those little tweaks where you're kind of flipping things around, do you think we could get that PDF updated for new guys coming in so they just have it smooth?
Like just the little tweaks I made.
Yeah, like I think most of us kind of switch around where you're bringing up the why before, like the suitability and shit.
Yeah, I can edit it, I'm sure, to like make it how we do it.
Cool.
Yeah. I'll just honestly probably just like put it into a Word thing, make the PDF into a Word, and then I'll just like change it up a little bit and I'll send you guys that.
Put that IT degree to work.
Yeah, for real. And then one more thing here too, guys. So quick incentive for June. Want to throw out like a 20K incentive. So issue pay 20K, because I feel like that honestly is the number everybody in this chat should be hitting. Like 20K a month. In my opinion, that's like you're making, that's good money, right? You're pulling in netting over 12, 15 a month, right? So 20K a month, honestly, I feel like should be the standard for all of us. And that should be like what we should be getting each month, like realistically, like everybody, that's less than a deal a day, and I feel like everybody should be going into every day expecting to get two personally. That mindset is huge of just expecting that, and just dialing just knowing it's going to come, just believing that it's going to come helps a lot. Obviously, I know that can sound like sales mumbo wumbo, but it is true, and it's always worked for me. So expect that, have that 2 deal a day mindset. No matter how, I don't even care as much about the premiums. I care about getting 2 deals a day, and the premiums just stack up, you know. But hit 20K a month. I'm going to send you $700 to put towards your leads. Okay. I mean, I guess you could use it for something else, but I hope you would spend it on leads, because then you can take that $700 into 3 or 4 grand pretty easily. All right. So anybody who hits 20K a month in June, you have to issue it in June. I'm gonna send you $700. All right. Sound good?
Woo!
Let's go.
Right.
Thanks, dude.
Make me poor. But all right. Anybody else have anything they want to go over? I appreciate you guys all hopping on a Sunday. Well, from now on, I think most people requested we do these Saturday mornings instead, so we'll probably do that going forward. Yeah. Anybody else got anything? All right, word.
Thank you, bro.
All right. Love you all. See you all tomorrow.
Sweet. Thanks, Joey.
See you guys.
Thanks, dude.
Joey.
Thank you. Good stuff.